Hey there, and welcome to Be Unmessable with the podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and today my guest is Jennifer Hamady. She is a performance coach and a consultant, as well as a board-certified therapist that specializes in technical and emotional issues that interfere with communication and self-expression. That's a very useful kind of therapist as far as I'm concerned. Her clients include Grammy, Emmy, and American Music Award winners, TEDx speakers, Edison Award winning inventors, and corporate executives from Google, IBM, Merck, and other areas of industry. Jennifer is the author of 3 books on the psychology of creative and personal performance. She writes regularly on the topic for Psychology Today, and she presents workshops, keynotes, and corporate engagements all over the world on a very frequent basis. She's on the faculty of the Writers Center and American University in Washington, D.C., and she is a friend of mine, and I am so happy that she said yes to being on the show today. So let's welcome Jennifer.
Thank you. Well, it's so wonderful to be with you, Joss. Honestly, I've been such a fan and lover of you and your work for so long. It really is such an honor and joy to be with you.
I feel the same way every time you're in any one of my courses or any free coaching thing I do on Facebook. Your face just exudes possibility, and it makes me so happy every time I work with you because I know you're absorbing everything like a sponge.
Yeah, well, that's true. Thank you.
Yes. But tell us about how you ended up doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is so interesting. It's not just like any kind of therapist. It's such a specialty
Mhm.
that is dealing with a situation that every single person deals with in terms of communication and self-expression. So talk to us about how you ended up doing this.
Mhm. Well, and please cut me off if I get a little long-winded, but the short version of the long story is that I was a professional singer like you for many, many years. Never thought about coaching, being a voice teacher, definitely never thought about being a therapist. But as I moved through my performance career and also after a kind of tricky situation in college with a voice teacher, I started to see the correlation between emotional issues, fears, insecurities, and issues with the voice. So I wrote a book about my experiences with that. I kept kind of getting the same emails and thought it'd be better to just answer those questions in a
I
book.
get it. Yes.
Yes, rather than emailing the same thing every day. And then I ended up going back to graduate school in psychology just to sort of get the academic underpinnings of what I've been doing intuitively. But yeah, I really believe, I can't put an actual number on it, but probably 90 some odd percent of seemingly vocal issues, and I would say performance issues, whether you're a
Yeah.
singer, speaker, are either caused or exacerbated by some kind of an emotional or fear-based issue. So to deal with just technique misses, it might be a tip or trick that fixes something temporarily, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem.
And that's what I love about what you do, because it's about getting to the source of what's happening versus the band-aid.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's the intention.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. So then you started doing this, and what have you found, like when you do work with people, and I know you work with all kinds of people from executives to speakers and performers, what is like the top thing that messes with people's self-expression in your experience?
Hmm. Well, of course, like a million ideas are running in my mind, but I think the top one is that people in general have. I don't want to say incorrect, but they're either not clear on what performance means to them, or they don't have an empowering idea of what performance is for them or for others. So, in other words, when people think about I'm going to get up and sing or speak or be on a podcast, there's a wall that goes up, consciously or not, about me having to jump over some divide to
Mm,
the audience. And rather than an often overused word, but an authentic sharing or act of service or being with someone. So I think that is honestly a blind spot.
yeah.
Many people, what is it that they even consider performing to be? Is this word actually helping this sort of linguistic construct, performance? Even that word for me, after so many years of doing it, has this kind of me versus them or me at them idea rather than I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to offer something in my speaking or singing that I love to do that I really hope makes a difference for someone. So I think recontextualizing the notion is one of the biggest things I do, and to your question directly, one of the biggest issues that I see.
I think that's amazing, actually, because I coach a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I work with them on is mastering the world of performance. And you wouldn't maybe think of that in
Yeah,
business, but
right.
in the context that I use it in, it really is your actions and inactions. That's what performance is.
Oh,
And
yeah.
most people don't function from the world of performance. They function from the world of reasons and justifications and emotions and all that whole, which is like kind of the default world, which is kind of what you're saying. It's like that gets in the way of the actual performance, because even as a singer, it's it is actions and inactions. When you're on stage, you're either taking certain actions or not taking certain actions. That is your performance,
Yeah.
and then there are the performance results, and you can hear that in business, but there's the performance results of an actual, entertainment performance as well.
Yes.
So I think that people are confused about performance, which goes to your point. When you recontextualize it or give them a new relationship to what is performance, it can alter their actions and inactions and hence their results.
Yeah. And if you don't mind,
No, please.
the word results. First of all, that's amazing that you're doing that. And in my love of you, please let me know when you're doing. I just think that I'd love to learn more about how you do that, because it sounds like there's a lot of alignment. And
That's the mastery program that I told you about last year, but that's the whole thing, is mastering performance, creation, and freedom.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
But to results, I think that's another piece. And I'm sure that I know this is work you do, but I think that's another question with performers, executives, anyone that you work with. I think people get hung up on the result that I want. Not only what is my view of performance, but what result do I want? And I think whether they're aware of it or not, it's perfection,
Mm.
or to look good, or to do well, or unconsciously, usually to validate myself, to prove that I'm worthy, to prove that they were wrong about me. All of these things. So when people get up to sing or speak and that panic rises in them and that performance anxiety, and they think, oh, I'm just nervous to say what I'm going to say, or I'm not prepared enough. To your initial question, that's where the work I do, that psychological piece of saying what's really at play here, because it's not what you're about to sing or what you're about to say. Maybe there's normal butterflies, but there's something else going on. You've got your worth tethered to the performance, or you've got something else at play that they're usually not aware of, and so they can't fix.
Yeah, completely. When some of my clients do speaking, and when they have what you're talking about, like that kind of performance anxiety, what people would call, right?
Mhm.
Um, it almost always boils down to a version of what you're saying, which is their attention is on themselves. It's about them and doing well or not getting canceled or whatever, versus shifting the focus to what is the impact that you want to have. And it's the same thing with actors. As you know, I work with actors, and when they go into an audition to get the job, it's they're so off in terms of what the focus needs to be.
Yep.
And being able to have a vision that is
Hmm.
not about you but includes you can give you a whole new life to whatever you're performing in.
I love that. A vision that is not about you, but includes you. And that reminds me of, there's so many ways that servant leadership, or I love that idea of coming alongside of your audience, another word that does or doesn't work, being a part of. Again, it's not me versus or me over. It's with.
Yeah, I like that, like a shoulder to shoulderness, as you did that. People who aren't seeing this, but they're listening.
Yeah.
You did a hand motion, which reminded me of being shoulder to shoulder with someone and looking
Yeah.
at whatever it is you're creating and co-creating.
Yes. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the work that you do to unleash that in people, because it's so missing, and it's not just for people that are in the public eye, it's
Mhm.
in relationships. So tell us a little bit about what you discover with people and
Mhm.
those kind of blocks
Mhm.
or blind spots in their relationships in terms of self-expression and communication.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned relationships, because I have, without intending it at all, I've got a number of and a growing number of couples that are coming to me for therapy. So I'm a licensed therapist as a result of my graduate work, and so my days are so fascinating. Some days I'm at American University working with, the singers. I'm on the voice faculty. Some days I'm working with private clients, and then some days I have, mixed in there are a couple couples. So, I really do get sort of a very close view of how these issues, these, we'll call them performative issues, um, show up in and mess up relationships. And I think, I'm not trying to be a hammer with a nail to answer your question, but I
Yeah.
think there, I don't believe in compartmentalization. I think that, you can't have some outstanding and really problematic anxieties in one area and be completely at peace in another.
Yes.
There's something going on, and it's not about what's happening usually over there. So I think it's a similar kind of thing. I know I'm using words that, may mean different things to different people, but the challenge of being really vulnerable and honest in a relationship, whether it's at work or in a marriage. I think that the defensiveness that comes up, I know I'm using a lot of hand motions, and forgive me, listeners, but
Yeah.
is just like that sort of fourth wall of a stage where people are trying to jump over, meet over to the audience, and that creates its own barrier. Similarly, I think in relationships and marriages, it's people standing kind of isolated on their own, saying, how can I, you know, how can I not get hurt in this dynamic? How can I protect myself? And they don't recognize that the desire for self-protection means that they're not being able to be present, And so I talk a lot about, you can either have self-expression or self-protection. And
Mm.
maybe counterintuitively, when you really focus on, I'm not going to defend myself, I'm really going to be present, which I know sounds, dangerous. Then when you have nothing to protect and nothing to hide, you have a better view of what's going on, and you're much safer than you realize. So that's a lot of the work that I do with couples is, what are you defending? What is it that you're afraid of? It looks like the other person, whether it's your partner or your coworkers or your audience, but usually it's something in you that you're just projecting onto them, and resolve that within yourself. And then the boogeyman of the other just becomes, again, that shoulder to shoulder ally, or certainly can.
It would be great if people in politics would work with you and be nice to see a bit more shoulder to shoulder in our world, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you have done this work so beautifully. It's interesting. We're having this conversation in the morning after the debate, regardless of people's views, but this whole being right and proving people wrong, and as if there's something in there to win, and as if it's weak to be interested and curious about nuance, and to make concessions, and to say, listen, we're trying to learn, we're trying to grow together, rather than prove that we're right and they're wrong, and all of that wonderful work that's such a part of what you do. So
Yeah,
thank
well,
you. Likewise, I think would be great if you helped everyone.
yeah, maybe we should just do a political workshop. That should be our next project together.
The answer is always yes.
Yes,
Always.
right, exactly. Given the show is called Be Unmessable With, and you've been working inside of my Unmessable With technology for a couple of years now and longer ultimately, but it's not about being tough. As you know, it's really about being able to act from your vision, fulfill on your vision, and not get stuck in the world of reaction or survival. So, is there something that comes to mind in your life, a circumstance that you were dealing with, situation that was so difficult that it could have taken you out,
Mm-hmm.
but you somehow transcended the
Mm-hmm.
situation and emerged what you and I call unmessable with?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's funny. I had you when you asked me originally. I had one story which I've talked about before in books and things. I have a number of them, and I'll share a different one if you don't mind. That's
Sure,
now
absolutely.
because you're a singer too, and you work with actors. In one of my last tours, I woke up one day on my last tour with Cirque du Soleil. I think I was in my mid 30s, and was like, I think I'm good. I had a wonderful time. I loved living out of suitcases, but I was like, I think I'm good. But previously on that last tour, I had, and I know not everyone listening is familiar with audio technology, but I had a tremendous challenge hearing myself on stage for reasons that, I actually do go into in one of my books. But, when you get to that level of performance, you have what are called in-ear monitors. There's, it's wonderful. It helps you, it protects your ears, but you can't, there's no air. I had a hard time hearing is the long and short of it.
Yes.
And
I
then
vaguely recall that kind of thing from my boy crazy days.
right, exactly, exactly. But the long story short of it is that I couldn't hear, and the result I was getting was not good. I mean, it was fine, but for me, my pitch would waver. I couldn't hear that my pitch was wavering. I was frustrated. I tried to communicate about it. It wasn't received well. Nobody else seemed to be having these problems, and I at the time didn't have the tools or the confidence or the capacity to either accept that it was the way that it was and make peace with it and just do my absolute best. I got my self-worth kind of like, "Rrr," and I ended up just being really unpleasant to work with. I was
Mm.
frustrated. I was mad at the engineer who was, I'm sure, doing his absolute best. So the tour was fine. It ended up being fine. I left. I had a great experience otherwise. But how I overcame it and something I'm proud of, and it really does involve humility and kind of completing things, is that when I wrote my last book, I'm working on another one. A big part of that is about the technology on stage and in the studio and the relationships. Back to relationships. It's not just about do you know how to use a mic, but can you communicate with and are you willing to communicate with and listen to the people with whom you're working? I shared that story in the book and I acknowledged like I didn't do a great job. I really didn't. And it was wonderful. It was so in the moment, I didn't kind of find myself to be unmessable with, but I allowed myself. So maybe this is a great example too, that these things don't have to be on a continuum of a temporal continuum. But I really was able to recognize that I was messed with. And even though I couldn't get that fixed for myself in the moment, I wrote a book about how to be unmessable with, to use your
Mm.
phrase, for others, which does require communication and humility. And what was missing for me, radical acceptance of just what is. If it's
Well,
rain,
it's
yeah,
it's fascinating what you're saying because when you're saying radical acceptance of what is, communication and humility, those are all the things that it sounds like what you work with people on.
yeah, yeah,
So it's kind of like your pathway to transcend whatever is the block or the messable with moment in my language, right?
yeah.
And being able to develop those soft skills, I guess you would call it, or those muscles,
Hmm.
can lead you to a whole other space where you don't have to get taken down or messed with or effed with, so to speak,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I'm looking at this beautiful day here. I'm near Washington, D.C. It's sunny and the trees, the leaves are changing, but it's kind of like resisting if it's raining. There's no point in resisting that it's raining. And we do that. So many of us, not about the weather necessarily, but we're upset about, that we didn't get a certain part or we didn't get the raise or we're procrastinating. I mean, you pick your thing. We
Oh,
resist.
well, my husband resists traffic. That's it. When we're in traffic, he goes insane. He's like all on the thing, trying to get another route to go. I'm like, seriously, it will end at some point. We will get where we're going. So we could just be here in the car and talk, it's okay.
But even within our own minds, we resist our thoughts, we resist our bodies,
Yes.
resist everything, and we don't know it's resistance, especially when it's internal, right? And so I think that it is such an important piece. And I think a lot of people get confused because they think acceptance is surrendering or kind of conceding or flipping over on your back, and it's not. It's just this is just what's happening right now. So you know, now what?
Yeah. And
Yes.
it's, I think the word acceptance sort of has a bad rap because it does imply going backwards. It's like, well, I just have to accept that this is the way it is, as
Yes.
opposed to what I would call authoring or choosing what
Mhm.
is,
Yeah.
kind of. And people go, well, you can't choose what is because you have to have a choice between at least two things to make a choice. But real choice is choosing what is
Yes.
exactly the way it is.
Yeah.
And then you're free to create. But in most people's minds, acceptance, which I think is a little too passive. It's kind of like, well, I got to accept that that my mother-in-law is a jerk or whatever. It's like, no, 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 you don't have to accept anything. You can choose your mother-in-law exactly how she is.
Right. Yeah.
And now what?
It's so interesting. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I spend a lot of time in one of my books about language. I have a whole chapter on language and how language is so powerful in ways we do and don't realize. Like, for example, I think one of the examples I use is the word love. we all know what love means, but we don't. It's different for you. It's different for me. It has all kinds of connotations. And so acceptance, choosing, same thing. And so, I think it's another piece of my work is just making sure that people consciously think about the words they use and are they working for them, and what words could work better, especially with singing. We use words like, for those who don't know, support and projection. And are those words helping you, or are they hindering you? Are they allowing freedom, or are they kind of creating physical and mental tensions? But
Mm.
yeah, I'm on a slight tangent there, but
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, it's so funny because I don't sing anymore, as you know, most likely. But I just got invited to a 40-year reunion of the producers that produced my hit, and got invited to sing. And right away, I was like, absolutely not. I'm definitely not singing. I'll host it, but I'm not going to say. And it was amazing when you say about resistance, how much because I haven't sung in 30 years, really, for the most part. And it was like, no, 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 no. And then right after I said no, I was like, well, wait a minute. What is that about? Like, why am I so no, 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 no? What the heck is that about?
right.
So I this week said yes, which I now I'm regretting, of course, 'Cause now I'm gonna have to like rehearse it and get my, range back and all that. Luckily, it's not too rangy a song, but it's so funny because it's like right there, that resistance that you're
Mhm.
talking about. Like, and my body tensed up, and the whole thing that you talk about
Yeah.
happened in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm not even there, and it's happening.
Yeah. Well, and Joss, please redirect me
No,
on
please, please.
as I said, could talk to you forever about everything, but that you're bringing up two, I'll make it quick, very interesting points about performance in general. When we used to be, back in our caveman days, right? We didn't get invitations to attacks by a lion. We didn't get
Right, right.
by warring factions like 3 months from now. But when we know we're going to have a performance, right, or a big event, whether it's a wedding or a family reunion, something that might trigger us, we literally are living, that moment all the time and getting activated, and the cortisol getting activated and things like that. And so that is an interesting thing too. And I found the only real the only real antidote to that twofold is to be really prepared. So if I'm in that situation, if I have to do a keynote or something, or a lecture, and I find myself getting nervous, I say, well, I can do one of two things in this moment. I can prepare, like
Yep,
just
you can
prepare,
go
right?
through your slides and go through your talk and what are you creating?
Exactly. And or I can say, right now I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to, literally cognitively pull myself with discipline to something
Yes.
different. And even if I struggling with that, I'll go be of service somewhere. I'll go pick up trash in the neighborhood, whatever that is. So I think that's important. And then just quickly to the resistance piece, I think people resist resistance. Not you necessarily, but I know I do. I feel resistance, just like performance anxiety. Go, that shouldn't be there. And again, so whether it's choosing or acceptance, it's like, there it is. And I think when we understand psychologically, for most of us, what's underneath that is human beings don't like change. We're comfortable where we are, but there's a million cliches. But when we want to get where we're going, which only we as humans have the ability to do, to say, I want to create something I've never seen, that resistance is going to be there. So it's getting a better relationship with resistance. Oh, yes, what I want is on the other side of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the whole image of even the word resistance, as we talk about language, there could be a word that would be more empowering. It's like pressing up against something,
Yeah.
pressing up against a limit or pressing up against a lid, as
Yeah.
I like to always be taking the lid off. Like that to me occurs as more empowering than I'm resisting something which is coming at me. It's more pushing up versus getting pushed down. That
Ooh,
could work for me.
I can't. I just thought of something as you're saying that feels better for me, because you're right.
Yeah.
Resistance isn't a great word. You
It's a
feel,
sucky word. It's like, ugh.
but you feel the pressure that comes from like right on the other side, and if you can push through that pressure, on the other side is the release and everything you want. So I like that. Maybe I'll start thinking about the pressure. I don't feel resistance. I feel the pressure that comes when I'm getting close to that
Yeah,
thing.
it's like, you're coming up. Now we're going to get into, like, we could do this for hours, when it's a very cloudy day, right? And it's like lots of clouds in the sky. It seems like it's solid. But if you go up on the
Mhm.
other side of the cloud, are space and blue sky, and you just
Yeah.
got to get beyond the clouds. So it's kind of like pressing up against a cloud. Oh,
Yes.
now we're really getting poetic.
And not only don't fight the clouds, but anticipate that they're going to be there. Because I think
Exactly.
that we don't. We think we shouldn't feel stressed out. We shouldn't feel nervous. We shouldn't feel anxious. We shouldn't feel, wary of vulnerability. But it's always there.
And that's one of the big things that I find messes with people is shoulds and shouldn'ts. The minute you have a should or a shouldn't, you are messable with. You are reacting to something and you're no longer in creation mode or in vision mode.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What a great conversation. So tell us how people can find you. And I know you wanted to make a generous offer to everybody listening. So tell
Yes.
us a little bit about how people can work with you.
Well, yeah, my website's findingyourvoice.com, and or theartofsinging.com. So those are two hopefully easy ones. Finding
I'll
your
put it in the show notes so you guys have a link to get to Jennifer.
Yes. And I do workshops. I have books, as I've mentioned. I write articles for Psychology Today, private sessions. And I was going to say that any of your wonderful listeners, I do a quick consult. Usually they're about $100, but I'm happy to do one for free for anyone that's heard your podcast and wants to have a conversation with me about anything, the possibility of working together, or even just to ask a question or talk or just connect.
Amazing. And all you have to do, those of you listening that want to take advantage of that, is if you go to Jennifer's website to the FAQ page, and I'll put that link in the show notes, just mention that you heard her on the Unmessable with podcast, and she'll, make that gift available to you. Very generous gift of your time and expertise.
Oh, happily. It's my pleasure.
That's so great. Thank you so much for being here. Any final words you want to leave people with?
Well, honestly, I'd love to take the chance to just say how appreciative of you I am. Honestly, I think you're wonderful. I really feel that you are truly just giving a gift to all of us with your wisdom and your heart. And so thank you. And thanks to everyone listening and or watching. And, Joss, not that I can speak for her, but we're both here always. And
Yes.
yeah, keep open-minded and open-hearted, I think is the last thought that I have.
Beautiful. And for those of you listening, if you heard something that made a difference for you, impacted you in some way, please share this episode with somebody that you think it would make a difference for as well. And take the opportunity, if you are called to rate and review the episode. That always helps us in the algorithms, whatever those are. I don't know. People tell me there's algorithms that we need to work with. So share it, and we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. Thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. And I never take for granted that you spend time with me. And I always want to make sure that you get value when you do. So I am including in the show notes a link for you for our Basics of Being Unmessable With workbook. It's a 12-page workbook that gives you all the basics of developing yourself to be unmessable with no matter what life throws at you, to be able to shift from the world of reaction to creation on a dime. And it'll give you a whole practice that you can implement in your daily life over and over and over again. So click on the link below and grab that 12-page workbook and let me know what you discover as you engage with it. Have a great week.